Hello and welcome to Talking Flutes Extra this week, with me, the old geezer from London Tan, Jean-Paul Wright. As usual, the intro and outro music is The Baby Elephant Walk by Henry Mancini, performed by the fabulous British flute player Barry Griffiths on a special arrangement using piccolo, C flute, alto and bass. A big shout out must go to our podcast sponsors, Trevor James Flutes, or TJ Flutes for short. It's well over 4 years since we began Talking Flutes podcasts, and TJ Flutes have been right behind us with their support to enable us to continue to make these. Thank you so much. This week on Talking Flutes Extra, and recorded earlier in the summer, I visited North London to the home of the brilliant Hungarian musician, flute player and teacher Noemi Gyori. Hailed for her passionate and vibrant performances, as well as the creative, elaborate interpretations that have captivated audiences worldwide, Noemi is quickly establishing a name in the classical music scene as an exceptional and versatile flutist. Today, I'm in a beautiful apartment in the north of London with a very special flute player. Noemi Gyori. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Noemi
Gyori.
Oh, hang on. Here we go. Noemi Gyori.
Very good. Very well done.
Gyori. Yeah. So Noemi Gyori, a beautiful, beautiful flute player, teacher, orchestral player, soloist, mother, wife. In fact, I think she does everything. And in front of me, and you won't be able to see this because it's a podcast, I have a beautiful bowl of strawberries and we've devoured 2 gorgeous cakes. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Noemi, for inviting me to your beautiful home today.
You're most welcome.
Now, obviously it's a flute podcast, and I'd like to talk about you as a flute player, where it started, your recordings, and no doubt along this route we'll deviate off, which is my way. But I'd like to start by just prefacing something that you've written on your website, and then dissecting that.
Very good.
And you said, I can clearly remember the thrill I felt when I picked up a flute the very first time, instantly knowing that the notes coming from that instrument were going to narrate my life. So describe that feeling to me and how the narrative of the Noemi that sits before me now has developed from that first note.
Yes, so it's really very true that I remember this moment. I had a neighbor who was a friend of mine, and she played the flute. So in fact, although I went to many classical music concerts as a child, I first was really enchanted by the flute, hearing this friend play who was not at all a professional. It just somehow really raised my interest. I really wanted to play this beautiful instrument. So I started to learn the recorder because I was only 5 years old. And even then, I always put the recorder on the side and I tried to play it as a flute. And I was so looking forward to the day where I could finally try this instrument, because I couldn't even, I couldn't blow into a flute before. I didn't have the chance for it somehow. And my grandfather, bear in mind, my whole family is completely unmusical. Nobody plays an instrument, and my parents didn't play an instrument. And my grandfather either, but he had a sort of a crazy neighbor who collected instruments, and for some very strange reason, he had an old American flute, a silver flute that he owned. I have no idea how that happened to be in Hungary in the 1980s. And because he had heard from my grandfather that I'm musical and I'm interested in music and I would like to play the flute, he sold this instrument to my family for nearly nothing. I think otherwise we wouldn't have been able to afford a flute, and let alone a silver flute. So I began to play on a very high standard flute, we can say. Well, of course, I couldn't tell that, but I think the sound of this flute was absolutely beautiful. And in fact, the person that I passed this flute on to also became a flutist. So I feel like it has something special in it because the sound has an incredible depth to it. Now that I talk about it, I would be fascinated to know where this flute is now. I could ask the person that I sold it to tell me who she sold it to. It would be nice to know the story of this instrument. But in any case, I remember that I got it, the flute, for Christmas, and I assembled it. And first of all, I could produce a sound. And because I knew some of the fingerings from the recorder, I could play a tune on it. And it was just an immense thing. It was just incredible. And I think I could feel that, wow, there is so much in it. And now I have to get it out, and I think I still have that. Yeah, I just still genuinely love to play. So many people described having a problem with the lack of performances and drive during the pandemic, for example. I think even if I never performed, I would still be playing because of this huge pleasure that it gives me.
Now, you grew up in Hungary.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Hungary was that?
So I was born in Budapest, and I more or less grew up in Budapest, not completely, because I lived a year in Japan and a year in the US. I wasn't very small, but I was 12 when I moved to Japan for a year, and I was 14 when I moved to the US for a year. Both of these were because my mother is a psychologist, a researcher, and she was a guest researcher in both of these places. In Japan, I studied with Laurent Kovács, who at the time was a guest professor at the Musashi No Academy. And in the US, we lived in California. My mother was a guest researcher at Stanford. And so I studied with Francis Blaisdell, which was absolutely amazing. And then I went back to Budapest, where I continued my studies. I went to the Béla Bartók Conservatory and then consequently the Liszt Academy. And then, however, I moved away from Hungary. So for a long time now, I haven't been principally living in Hungary.
When did you know that the flute was going to be your future?
I was 8 when I had a school task to write about who I want to become, like what kind of profession I'm interested in and what kind of things I do in order to become what I would like to be. And again, for a long time, I thought this is just my memory that I wrote about wanting to become a flute player. Then one day I found this notebook, and there was this writing, and it talked about the fact how I'm going to become a flautist and I'm going to travel the world, and how I think music teachers should be better respected and they don't earn enough. And so therefore, I'm always going to provide tickets for my teacher on my concerts. And it's there. And I can't even, I'm so surprised how on earth as an 8-year-old I even knew what a music teacher would earn, or, you know, or what kind of respect they would get, because certainly from me and my parents, they were getting a lot of respect. But it stands there. So I think I was 8.5.
Wow. And you knew then?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and I pretty much do what I wrote there.
For people who don't know Hungarian music, it is a very special musical culture. Very, very special. And we were speaking before I switched the microphone on about the surprise I felt when I first immersed myself into the Hungarian music scene 30 years ago, at the passion, the freedom. We'll cover musical freedom later, but the ability to tell a story, taking one line and make a story out of that. So we'll cover that a bit later. But playing the flute, it's an easy instrument to play fast, but playing slowly and soulfully. When did you understand that to create real music, it was not necessarily playing fast, but it was creating this voice? In other words, when did the voice really start coming out of your instrument?
I think playing quick thing, I realized very, very early on, because as you describe, in Hungary, there is an excellent education for classical music, which means that everyone has the opportunity to enroll in a music school, which has usually very, very highly trained teachers. You have to pay only a small amount of money and you receive an instrument. So basically, classical music education is possible for more or less anyone, I would really say. So to that comes a very well-built educational system, which means that Hungarian musicians oftentimes are really technically advanced very early on. And it's a strong part of the curriculum to have an outstanding technique. However, as I just told you, I lived in different countries, and this was very, very unusual at the time. And that meant that I basically fell out from this system in a sense. And we can say I fell out from this system during quite crucial years. So before enrolling to the conservatory, which is the beginning steps to become professional, which starts at age 14, 15. I was 15 when I enrolled. That meant that although I gained a place at the Bartók Conservatory, which is at the time was for sure the best conservatory. So I did get a place, but I was much behind on a lot of things because while I learned, I think, many, many crucial things in Japan and in the US, they were very different from those that the students in Hungary learned. And additionally, because we lived in Sendai and Laurent Kovács was working in Tokyo and in the US, I had to work and collect money for my lessons. In both places, I wasn't able to have weekly lessons. So I was working on my own as a very young person for several weeks at a time, very often. And well, that results in a very different kind of development. I was also doing a lot of free explorations, I have to admit. So I wasn't always following orders of the teachers, but I was just exploring repertoire pieces, which I loved. Especially in the beginning years, but I would say even at the start of the academy, I very, very often had the feeling that, well, I'm not going to be the fastest one. I'm kind of behind, and I had to find another way to stand out. I had to really see, okay, who am I? What can I give? And I think by the second year of the academy, I felt like I really caught up, and by then I could play X, Y, Z. I was able to do that, but I think therefore always remained a tool to me. I don't think that was the drive ever. That couldn't be the central thing, because for a while, let's say at least half a decade, I was in this very competitive environment, but not being able to really be on top of these kind of technical things, which I think was a really, really, really great school for me, because in the end, playing fast or being technical is only a tool. It's not the thing. It's not the art itself. It's one tool in the art. So I think already then I was really focused on the sound, and then later on I had a really great dental operation, which basically forced me to restart playing the flute, and I had to relearn how to position the flute on my lower jaw. And that again made me realize how important sound itself is, and how I produce the sound, and how I control this process, and how I grow in this process, I would say.
Let's briefly look at sound, because it's the sound that differentiates one person to the next person to the person after. Because we can all play the note, but we can't always climb inside the note and make that note alive, give that note life. The difficulty of making a blob on a piece of paper come alive, understanding sound. How have you, we're going to talk about some of your recordings later, but you have the ability as a flute player to really quickly change tonal colours, to be able to take a note, start in one place, but then this same note that's still there changes colour. How have you developed that? Do you use all your senses? Do you, not just your auditory sense, do you see things? Do you feel things? How is it?
I would say I rather feel things
Yep.
than see. And I think I'm really glad if that's heard, what you described, because that is one thing that is really important to me. I think I'm definitely always a risk taker in this sense. So it means that for me, this kind of extremes and extreme color changes or dynamics are at the forefront, and I'm ready to sacrifice even some of the perfection on a performance and even on a recording, to be honest. Very often I pick something that is less perfect but is more musically interesting in this sense, because I feel that depicts how I imagine the music moving. And again, that is, for me, that is the core, so to say. I think I experimented quite a lot with the fierce physical technique of sound production, just simply because I have a wish to produce something and I'm trying to understand how to do that. Why I had the wish? Probably because I heard a lot of extraordinary musicians, lots of extraordinary string players and singers, and I often felt that when I listen to flute players in general, and I don't want to say there aren't out there many extraordinary flute players, but I in general felt that the playing was very much focused on security, somehow security of sound, or just getting the notes out, and that always kind of bothered me, and I think therefore I always wanted to mimic this kind of fluidity of sound that I saw with some of the finest string players and singers. And so I think it is a lot the inner drive of that sound that fascinates me and that I want to evoke when I play. So that is kind of what I imagine, and the whole drive of the air as the piece happens or emerges. I think that is what stands at the center of attention. That doesn't mean that that is not inspired by, let's say, a text that I read, or I really love visual arts. Some of my family members are visual artists, so I do get inspired by colors, landscapes, paintings, sculptures, even just materials. They just live inside me, and that all comes out when I play. I don't visualize them while I play, I would say.
The ability to take a note, if we're going to use a color, purple, and then graduate that from purple to a hollow brown in the same note, even if it's a semi-breve or you're just dying away. It's an art form, but it is one that differentiates each musician. You get it with brilliant singers. They have this ability to have this really big sound, and it just fades away into nothing. And as a flute player, we're singers, really, aren't we?
I agree.
And I don't believe that we take enough notice of singers. We don't spend our time listening to singers. Also string players, because string players have this innate ability to be able to change texture with the pressure of that string on from the bow.
Yeah.
And the sound. I mean, sound is all as a flute player. Sound is all as us as humans. We communicate via sound. I have a voice, and whether I choose it to be a London voice, talk like that, or I talk my usual voice, or I talk as a French way, I don't know which way to talk. But we all have a voice, haven't we? And we communicate. Do you think that in education today and in flute teaching today, we pay enough attention to the developmental aspects of each individual flute voice, or are we concentrating on interpretation and the construction of music rather than the freedom to communicate a narrative?
Well, I think it's a really large and substantial question to answer. I don't think I can answer it as a whole, because I can't answer on the behalf of so many, even thousands of professors. I think certainly in my studio I do focus on this a lot, and perhaps that is, well, partially because it's a strong part of me, but secondly also because at the moment I have my own class in the junior department of the Royal Northern College of Music, so I don't have my own class of university students. However, I have my own class of teenagers, and I think that is very interesting because in this age, finding one's own sound and showing it and sharing that and finding a voice is something very relevant and something oftentimes not so easy. And I don't say that that becomes easier later on. It changes the way I work with 20-year-olds is different. You can work with them differently, and I think the question of finding your sound is at a different stage by then. And I think therefore there is huge attention on this in my class. I mean, it's what you need to progress in peace, steadily, with a good straight back and with pride, I think, as a young player. And I think it's tremendously beautiful to see how students grow in this process and how they become more and more daring in their playing and express things. And I think this was the biggest thing during the pandemic, that when I first started to teach online, I felt like, oh my God, I'm losing all of this. And that's when I realized how much I'm working actually on the sound, because at first I found it so difficult to work on this aspect in depth online as well. And suddenly I thought, oh my God, like, how am I going to continue teaching? I'm missing the thing. And then as I learned, I found a way how to work with that online as well, and now it's no problem. Of course, I always still much prefer to do it in person, but I think that also showed me actually how much attention there is on sound in my lessons. I probably wouldn't have realized that so clearly had I not had this experience of switching online.
Finding your sound, to me, has always been finding yourself, and the ability to begin to open yourself up. Because if you can open yourself up by beginning to understand who you are, the sound sort of develops.
I agree, because, sorry to interrupt there, but I agree, because I think sound is, well, first of all, to produce a sound, you have to understand the process. So you inspect something in great detail. Then you have to want to know what you want. You have to want to know, what do I do with this knowledge? And then you have to have a curiosity. What else can I do? And how do I explore that? And how do I work with that? And this is what I always tell my students as well. I think the beauty of that is that once you can do that on one field, you can do it on any. And you know the process, you know this beautiful process. And I think it's basically how we should live, right? So we should learn to understand, slow down, inspect, take it in, then have some goals. Okay, this is what I would like. I try to do it. Aha, is there another way? So you get curious, you start to experiment, you start to explore, you start to go this way, you start to go that way. And I think when you live like that, it can be only good. Basically, that's how I see it, because you know where you are in the process. And I think that is also excellent tool to handle criticism, to handle moments where you just fall on your nose and things don't work out, or when you feel really cornered, because this process you can always take up. You know, it always allows you to move and not to get stuck, I guess.
So you can develop your voice by developing your inner self, yourself. As soon as you begin to bloom, then your sound blooms. But crap happens in life.
Yeah, lots.
And that does have an effect on us as a musician.
Yeah.
And our general well-being. How do you, certainly when you're teaching teenagers, that is such a hard time in their lives. How can you get them to sort of place aside what's going on in their lives to free up what they're doing with their music Because it's
I
such
don't want to play. I don't want them to place things aside. I never want them to place things aside.
Wonderful to incorporate everything into.
Yes, yeah. So in fact, I have accompanied through my students lots serious health issues, all sorts of difficult life situations. I think the point is you don't have to put these things aside because they are essentially part of you and part of your life. I think what is really, really, really beautiful about making music, and most probably that's why I ended up becoming a musician, is because whatever you go through your life, you can still make music, and it lives in this music, and you can blow it away. For example, you can work with it. It enriches your playing as well. Like being angry gives qualities to your. You have to learn that as well. All these emotions add so much to your playing, I think. And I also don't believe in this protected way of practicing all the time as a child, because you have to have life experiences apart from your technique, because that's what makes you, and that's what grows you. So I think they just learn to appreciate, to have music, and I think that's why it's so good to have music. They will have difficulties in their lives a lot, whatever you do, because that's how life is. It brings challenges and difficulties, and once you have music, it's always a door for you to go in this world of your own, where you can work with these things and explore these things. And I really think it will always help to come through these difficult patches. When it is your work as well, it's a different situation, especially when you struggle with the work. So for example, when I had this dental operation, that was really difficult because it was obvious that I can't play the same way I used to before. So it was really, really hard. But all I could do is to use the same kind of tools that I described of just slowing down, restarting the process, and be patient. And I think I learned a huge amount. And now I work with these kind of things much better and quicker as well. Yeah, so I guess it's just difficulty and beauty of it all, I guess, and carrying that through this decades long of career. I think that's why probably we hear the richness of older players, the way someone sits down to play the most see-through Mozart and then it becomes so rich, is because there is the lifetime of these kind of experiences behind.
I completely agree with that. Is that when you have the thing I was once told many years ago to draw on life experiences when you're playing music, and if it's about grief, to be able to almost claw back these experiences, because if you're playing it very straight, you're not then conveying grief. So all our life experiences we can draw on in a recital or in our practice, and that is important. So I totally get that. Life is a patchwork of experiences, and the most brilliant musicians are often the most complicated ones.
Or had very complicated lives.
Yeah, but they seem to be able to draw on all of this tapestry of experience into performance.
But I guess also sometimes challenges create this need in you, the need to want to play, the need to want to, well, in a sense, also go back to your own world, where you can paint things the way you want, or where you can experience things the way you want, or where you can explore things without danger, because there is no musical police. The worst is a critic who can smash you, but in a sense there is no music police who will come after you. So it's an incredible, I think it's just an incredible thing that is there for us.
How do you get your students? Because we all have to have the bedrock of all our scales, our studies. Yeah. You have to build the house on firm foundations. How do you get them to break away? How do you get them to expand? How do you get them to take a line and do something magical with it?
Again, I don't see the breakaway. I think from the first moment when we pick up the flute, it is music making. So even if it's those, I always start with the moist exercise of the long notes, just chromatically, very easily. And I think we make, in a sense, we make music from this. And when we play the scales, that has also a shape, and it has to have an arch. And we talk about that all the time. Or a lot of the technical exercises we do, they happen within the piece. So it's not like there is the technique and there is the music. So it's like it's all together. When you practice, you make music, and whether that's 2 notes or whether it's about finding the way you interconnect the notes till the last one and then going up. So whether this is a warm-up or a scale or actually a piece, which is very often made up of scales and arpeggios, it's essentially the same thing. Of course, I don't want to say that practicing an F major scale is going to bring the same musical depth as performing Bach B minor sonata, but it is essentially the same material that you are working with in the very same way as you are working with a Bach. I remember that my teacher Zoltán Gyöngyösi in the Bartók Conservatory, he used to tell me that when he listens to someone, when they come on stage and they tune, when they tune, he can tell how this performance is going to be. And I often felt that that is such an exaggeration, and how would you be able to tell? At the time, I disagreed. But in a sense, I see that very differently now, because I feel when you see someone, a musician, for example, the way they pick up their instruments, the way, the relationship, the way, yes, they blow into it, the way they listen to that note, the way they respond to the pianist playing that A, let's say, or an oboist in the orchestra, the way they actually respond to that, the way they then adjust, just really tells fundamentally how they are, what is their approach, what is important to them. And yes, that in a sense outlines how their performance is going to be, most probably.
I like the connection between you and your instrument. And it's not one that I believe we think enough of. After all, we spend more time with our instrument than we do our partners. We are one with our instrument. And there's 3 words that you say encapsulate you: connection, expression, and sensitivity. They're 3 very powerful words, but in very different ways. What does each mean to you?
Well, I guess connection on every level, as you say, connecting with myself, the instrument, the music, the audience, the other players. So there is all sorts of connections when we do music, and I think we have to react to that all the time. And that's where sensitivity comes in. I think you have to be really quick and sensitive and clever how you use that connection, how you and how you initiate connections, and how you nurture connections, how you maintain connections, and all of that. And now you have to remind me, what was the second one?
The second one, which is one that really encapsulates you, I think, is expression.
Expression, of course, yes. Sorry, I'm just so in it that I don't have the words pinpointed.
Expression is music.
Well, that is why we do the whole thing. So
it's the storytelling, isn't it?
To express what is there in the music, and I think the way it interacts with us as well. So I think just quite recently, I can't remember where I read another interview. I think very often, of course, we read about the importance of the purity of delivering the music and of really respecting the wishes of the composers. And I do agree with this, but for me, I have to admit that the way it is being expressed by different artists is fundamental to me, because it is where I feel one Hamlet will be different than another one. And I think it's the beauty of it. And it's not because that artist doesn't respect the score, but it's because it interacts with that person differently, because parts of this will resonate to them differently, and it will inevitably create a different result. And I think that's why we have so many artists, and we need those artists because of these colorfulness. And so I think expression and the way we interact with the score for me is essential. And you said that you heard a certain freedom in my recordings. I think this is that as I age, I dare and I want more of this to come out, and I want to admit that this is something important to me. Of course, not saying that respecting the wishes of the composers isn't, but to let the things that resonate with me, to let them live and let them really come out as they are.
And you like pushing things, don't you? For example, the Royal Academy of Music, really prestigious
If you would
institution.
like to complicate your lives,
Yes, if you want to
push yourself, just call me. I can in 1 second give you tasks and all sorts of things like that.
Nobody had done a performing PhD
Yes.
at the Royal Academy of Music. Nobody.
Yes. I mean, no flutists.
No, that's right. Sorry, no flute player.
Yes.
Why?
Why? I mean, first of all, I guess I come from an academic family, which means that the proportion of PhDs in my family is very high. I don't think I felt that my family members thought that I'm not intelligent enough or anything like that. But, you know, it's a thing that lots of people did around me. So it didn't seem something, you know, so alien to me, let's say. The other thing is that I'm really driven as a teacher. And for example, in Hungary, you have to have a PhD to become a professor. So if I ever, for example, want to teach at the Liszt Academy or other higher education institution, I must have a PhD. But if I want to do something, I'm just the kind of person that if I spend the time, I want to spend the time and energy on something on a really high level and on a level that will really bring me forward and where I really learn a lot. And because I discovered that the Royal Academy of Music offers a PhD, so that also means that is a qualification which will be recognized anywhere and everywhere. So because there are so many forms, DMA and DLA and this and that, but I thought, okay, PhD is always everywhere understood and appreciated. Plus, I discovered that there was no flautist, and I'm in London. So I thought, all right, this is it. I have to do it. And I just had my first daughter born. And for some silly reason, I always thought that when I will have small children, it will be the time in my life when I will have time to learn some new things. So this was a plan for a long time, and I'm forever thankful for my mother never ever telling me that this would be something outrageous to think. She always said, okay, fine, but make sure that you still study before having kids as well. She always said that, but she never said that in a cautionary way. And so I thought, okay, here I am. I will have this baby, and it's perfect. I'll now do the PhD. Now I will have time for it, and that was the idea. And then, of course, I learned that the reality of doing a PhD is very, very different. And first of all, I didn't get in, so I had to apply second time, which only made my will stronger, I have to say. Yes, I think it was a tremendous journey. I learned really a lot. I learned in every way to be more focused, to be more driven, to really be resilient, I think. I certainly learned to write, to read very differently, therefore to read the score very differently, and also to kind of focus my performances very differently, I think. And especially writing the thesis and being pregnant with a second child and giving birth, and I don't know, I think that really put me through a period which was, I really didn't see how I'm gonna come through all of that, but I did. And I feel like it feels like that was the ultimate training in a sense. I kind of feel like, all right, now I'm, in a stupid way, I'm fit for life. Even before, I'm a person who is there, I'm there. Yes, you can count on me. I may not be perfect, or I may not be this or that, but I'm there. I'll do it. I'll do my best. I'm a person you can count on, but I feel like that has really multiplied, because I feel like, yes, I can persist and persist and correct and take it in and reconsider and again, because a lot of doing the PhD is a lot of work like that, and just sheer persistence and patience and perseveration, I think. So yeah, it was a beautiful school. Yeah, I think.
You mentioned your beautiful daughters. How has being a mother changed you as a musician?
Oh my God. I think it made me even more eccentric, which I find in a way really difficult because I guess being a mother, you have to be, and I am very organized, and you have to be very organized and very reliable and precise, and you have to provide this stability for your children. And yet, I just want to be more extreme and change things and be extremely bold, which means that I see in context where I want to push things and where I want to go further and really, let's say, break boundaries, so to say. Sometimes it scares me that as a mother, perhaps I shouldn't be like that, because you have to be, in a sense, as a mother, you have to provide this kind of stability, and perhaps it is, in a sense, you should be calmer, I guess, or that is how I have seen motherhood. But then again, when I think of those things, then I think, well, you know what? They should see how I think about it, and then they will themselves become more creative and will understand how you can change things and how you should dare to change things and explore things. Also, I guess I learned to practice it with much less time on my hands, and I became tougher. I think my main motto is to keep going, not let things stop me from playing, because there are really 1 zillion things a day that will make sure that I can't practice, or that I will feel like I'm underprepared or this or that. And I just feel that I can't let these things win over my wish to play. And in fact, years ago, when I heard István Matú's Hungarian flautist play, and I really, really admire him. He plays so differently from me, so differently. And I just thought, oh my God, if you continue something for so long with a certain intensity, there is something born out of that which is so powerful and beautiful, and nobody can do that for you, only yourself. And so that is kind of my lifeline. I guess I also became more fearless on stage, we can say, because with all these life experiences and having children, I just understood that one concert is one concert. There are heavier things out there. And I guess when I was younger, I took it more seriously in this sense.
Has your inner critic changed?
It has, but I think I'm very critical. I'm always very critical. I could be less critical. This is something I think I could improve. I think mainly now the difficulty is that I'm overall critical, because there are so many things at the moment, really, there are so many things that I'm doing, and I'm trying to do them all to a pretty high level. Let's say I really am trying to be a good partner to my husband and to support his amazing career and really be next to him, because there are so many complicated situations. Or I'm trying to be there for my children, or I'm trying to cook and provide a really warm home. And, then I want to be a cutting edge player and a very caring teacher, and, all of that. And it's just too much. It's too much.
So how do you prioritize the balls that you're juggling?
So it means that in my heart, I could devote so much more to each of them, and yet they are all so important that I can't just say I let go of any, because I just can't. So,
are you better at time allocation now?
I'm certainly better at time allocation, and what I try to do is I really try to see where I need to lean to in that certain moment. So now this part needs more, now that part needs more, and then I lean into that. But that still means that once, let's say, situation improved on that front, I realize, oh my God, there is the other, oh my God, there is the other. And I guess this is what I need to learn more patience with, is to accept, okay, here's what I chose. I chose to want to do so many things. and this is how it is. And, you know, it's just like a circus act that you catch each ball in that one moment when it would fall, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's this kind of thing. And I think, I guess, until the point I have done less things, I was just knowing they're all up in the air. And that made me think, okay, it's fine, they're all up in the air. And now I'm always having to catch them before they fall. But that's also it also means that the whole thing goes on a next level, right? Because that's already a thing that you would admire in a circus, whereas the other one is less so, I guess.
So that would, in essence, then give you a lot more freedom when you're taking a piece of music to perform that, because you're looking at the context, you're looking at the construct that the composer wants, but you can draw so much now because you're juggling lots of things.
I guess so. I think it's also the depth to it. So juggling so many things, but what it means. I guess also when you become a parent, you are responsible for another person's life, and you can be responsible for another person's life in so many ways, not only by having children. But I, for example, I was lucky not to have seriously ill family members until that point, or so I wasn't in this caring position before. Lots of people are, but for me this was a huge change in this kind of seeing human relationships also on another level. I think when you are that vulnerable as a child or as someone that is dependent on you in a different way than your partner, teaches you a lot. Yeah, I think.
How do you balance? So you're a soloist, you're a chamber musician, orchestral flutist, teacher, and you record CDs.
Yes.
And there's anyone that's ever produced made us their own CD will know the complications and I would say heartache, but it's not really heartache. It's just emotional effort that goes into making a CD. You're a mother, you're a teacher. Where is Noemi?
It's all of it.
Who is Noemi? Who is?
It's all of it. By the way, the recording, going back to the recordings, I feel like I really, really enjoy recordings and I really want to do more. I feel like it's a time in my life where I really, really want to record. I think I learn from recording so much. And I think it's a beautiful thing to want to perfect something in that one moment of your life and to have that and to be able to listen back to it. I think it is in a way very different than listening back to a wonderful concert recording, which is differently really nice. But I think it's something that I immensely enjoy at the moment. And I just feel like I really, really want to make sure to continue with it because I think it is something that will really add to the artist that I am. Where am I? I think it's a great question because often people ask me, how do I recharge or when do I take a holiday or whatever? And I think from a very early age onwards, because I went to a very competitive school and I went next to that competitive school, I went to the conservatory later on. I lived in different countries. Then for some time I went to one university, but then I did for years parallel universities or music academies. My husband did the same, and I think there was always so much more than one person would do. And I had this technique of escaping from the one thing to the next. So I feel like this is also what I do. I kind of like, as you said, the color changes, like I just shift, I guess. It's also a way of maybe escaping. But what I discovered is that also it's not a way of escaping, but it's like a way of escaping from things to narrow or really stiffen or really get harsh in a situation. So when I have another place to go, doesn't mean that I left it there, but I'm not cooking in it in a sense. So I think having so many things allows me to kind of like vanish from one to the other and then back, and then kind of it feels like while I am away, something is growing there, and then I can go back and kind of move on more easily than if I would be all the time there. So somehow I really admire people who can build careers like, for example, just being a professor or just being an orchestral flutist or just like, writing about music. Because to me, it always feels like it gets so much. I think I can't bear it because it feels like it is getting hard on the edges. In this way, I can get away from that. And I'm hoping that I still can raise the standards so high that I'm not missing out.
If you could write a letter to your 16-year-old self, what advice would you give now?
Ooh, what advice would I give now to myself?
Knowing what you do know now.
You know what? I don't know what advice I would give myself. I think I'm pretty happy with what I have done, because I think what advice would I give myself implies a little bit if I had to correct something, or if I wanted to be someone different. I think it's fine what I have done, and I think that's what I propose to everyone. I don't think the real matter is what you have done, but if you feel like something is not the way you want, then it is the moment to change it, however. So it is really about which way you are going, and from, okay, I'm here and this is what I want to do, and that's where my focus lies. And I don't think I should be giving advice to myself backwards, in a sense. I don't know if there is anything I could say. Also, I wouldn't say people should ruminate too much about what they have done. They should ruminate about what they are doing now and what they want to do and how they do that, and make sure to do it in the best possible way. Yeah, and go from where you are, I guess.
That is probably the most genuine answer I've ever been given. A lot of people that I speak to would say, concentration, or take every opportunity, or don't worry. But I like the fact that you're just very open and just say, let's not look back. And I totally agree. It's the only thing that is important is now. We can learn from what we've learned. And as a 16-year-old, there's a naivety there, which is joyful. And if you're going to write a letter to that 16-year-old as an older person, in a way, you're sort of tinkering on the edges with that naivety. So I applaud you for your answer. I think
Thank
that is very, very genuine. So who has been the biggest influence in your life, either as a musician or as an individual?
Well, as an individual, and both as a musician, I would say my husband and my family, I think. Mainly because I'm lucky to have a husband who is a musician. He is also Gergely Madaras. He's also a flutist and conductor, and really, really brilliant musician. And because we have been together now for, I don't know, I even can't count, 22 years or something like that. I stopped counting in a way. It means that I have spent more than half of my, more than half of my life with him, let's say. But also my parents. My parents are, I think, just genuinely really motivated, super interested people. They always supported me and believed in me, and they both love the arts. They are academics, so not artists, but they do appreciate art and music. I think I'm just super lucky to therefore have this immensely strong network and support and belief. And I have to say, you asked about being critical, and I think I'm so lucky that all of them can give me very valuable critique, but which is also really forward pointing, so really intended in a way that I grow from it. Yeah, so I really rely on them. And then after that are my children as well, because I think they really also provide an incredible foundation, and the way they handle situations, the way they actually behave in situations really inspire me. So I would say that, and of course on top of that, again, I guess I'm so lucky. I think I meet so many interesting people from all sorts of sectors. And that's partially why I love being in London as well. I think I have lived in so many different places, but of all places, London, I feel, is a real melting pot of people with so many different backgrounds, different life journeys. But there are also so many people who are really motivated, or maybe because of the hugeness of the city and the harshness of it as well, it also really ignites this drive in people, I guess. It really does, I feel. And I love that. I love that because I guess that's the motor of things. So you really feel alive. I feel people are really alive, and let's hope that that is in the positive way and not bringing people down, this pressure, but it can really raise things to a super high level, I think.
Noemi, I feel that you're alive in Talking Flute. I feel that you're alive in these gorgeous cakes, but more importantly, I feel you're alive in your music.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. You're off to
Thank
Budapest
you.
again tomorrow.
Yes, it's true. So lots of packing is planned for today.
And you are a joy to speak to.
Thank you.
I learn so much when I speak to, and my only regret is I didn't have the machine recording when we spent an hour beforehand just chatting about general things, because you have such a good and interesting life story that I think all the parts need to come out, and no doubt they do in your music.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Noemi, and also to you for listening this week. Don't forget to like and rate this podcast on whatever provider you're listening to this on, and also pop along and like or follow us at Talking Flutes on Instagram and Facebook. If you've any questions that you'd like to put to Claire and I, then it's at flutepodcasts@gmail.com. Until next time, wishing you a musically fulfilling week ahead with whatever you've got planned. Goodbye. Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.